Thank you everyone for joining us for our webinar today, Maximizing Returns. I'm going to pass it over to Ed Caldwell and Rod Walker, your presenters today. Ed?
Thanks, Kenan. My name is Rod Walker. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Kotter. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to our conversation around growth and within private equity. I've been in consulting for, over 20 years. My primary focus has been helping organizations transform and doing that with a focus on the head, which is, outstanding business results, but also focusing on helping those cultures and the workforce be energized along the way. So I look forward to our time here today.
And hello, everyone. Ed Caldwell. I lead our global change management practice at RGP. And it's our RGP and Kotter. We have a strategic alliance where we are working with clients to really help deliver results and accelerate results around large transformational events. So that's been my experience as well. Large ERP, functional business transformations, finance, supply chain, sales and operations, and others. And so really today, what we'd like to walk you through is how to accelerate growth and kind of walk you through the approach that we're using together to do that. So let's start with a few questions because this is typically how we help those who we're talking to, our clients and others, to kind of think about how to accelerate companies' growth. And we know that in the transactions that you are involved with, being able to accelerate the growth, being able to maximize your return on investment is absolutely paramount. It's the reason why you do what you do. So what if finance? Oftentimes we know that finance transformations is a big part of the initial opportunity to transform. What if finance operated with that increased agility, that provided real-time reporting, that was able to meet the ever-increasing demands from the business? What would it take to be able to accomplish that? What about unprecedented innovation from the ground up and using the power of the workforce to be able to just really drive innovation at a pace and at an opportunity that just has not existed before? What about creating world-class future states in terms of operations and how an organization turns work around and accomplishes objectives that it has? At the end of the day, what we'd like to talk to you about is what we've been talking to other clients about in terms of what if you could measure a direct financial return on your investment in as little as 90 days. So we have an approach that we've been working with our clients around that we would like to share with you. And specifically, it's around accelerating and sustaining transformational efforts from a people perspective. And more specifically, it's from a culture perspective. Culture, quite frankly, it's defined as how the work gets done. So it's how leaders align. It's how priorities are made. It's the focus of organizations of those top priorities. And it's the workforce, of how the workforce, the power of the workforce is harnessed to really support and drive and accelerate these transformational efforts, whether they're a finance transformation, some sort of other business ERP implementation, or other sort of a very significant change that you're going through. And working with Kotter, we've realized, and kind of on the back of Dr. Kotter's 40 years of research, 21 books and counting, that there is a heart component, there's an emotional component to change, there's also a head component, there's a scientific component to change. And we know that where we can influence the culture to drive results, that's going to allow you to accelerate and sustain these efforts. So at a high level, what we mean by this is alignment of leaders is very important. Oftentimes leaders today are focused on too many priorities. So there's a lot of things that get done, they just get done very slowly. And you're not able to accelerate what truly matters, what's critical to the business itself. Building that sense of urgency, it's really working to build a groundswell of innovation, of energy from the workforce to drive and to really support higher productivity and higher performance on these efforts. And generating short-term wins. Everyone wants to be associated with a win, with a success, and celebrating that is key to kind of fueling and driving that transformation over. So the approach that we'd like to kind of walk you through over the next 45 minutes is new actions of how people behave, of how work gets done, does generate additional results, does accelerate these results. This then creates new habits at the organizational level. And ultimately, this allows culture to stick, that new way of working at the organizational level. And that's what we'd like to kind of talk to you about today. So as we go through the next 45 minutes or so here, please feel free to use the chat feature to input questions, to raise your hand. We will stop as necessary. We don't have to wait until the end, but just let us know if something strikes you, if you want to comment on something, or just ask the question as we go along. Okay, so we have a polling question, and this question is around what's the big deal about organizational culture? And I'll ask Kenan to kind of help us launch this poll, and then we'll go through it.
Yes, everyone, thank you. So first polling question. So what is the big deal about organizational structure, culture? Number one, aligned leadership to set the pace to achieve desired work. Do you want to press the rest of the questions so they can see them on the screen too, Ed? There we go. Thank you. Aligned leaders set the pace to achieve the desired workforce culture. B, improved workforce habits are required to sustain the optimal culture. C, organizational results are drastically impacted by culture. And D, all of the above. Great. There we go. Pretty resounding, all of the above.
Pretty resounding, yes, indeed. And we know that aligning leaders, that sets the pace, because if there's too many priorities, the workforce is going to be too many things, and you end up getting mediocrity that really isn't accelerated. Improved workforce habits for sure. At the end of the day, what we're all advocating is, how does the workforce optimize productivity and performance? Are they focusing on the main things? Are the main things the main things? And how are you utilizing the power of the workforce to drive these results? And then ultimately, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And as the workforce works and gets work done, and as decisions are made and innovation are made and wins are generated, that drives results. So yeah, that was our first question. Thanks for answering that. Let me turn it over to Rod.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. What we're going to do now is take a bit of a shift. We want to show a video that's about a little bit over 2 minutes long. And the tee up for the video is to, it's a previous client where they are, I would say, 80% through their journey. So they're not at the end. They're just sort of in the middle, had some aha moments and still a ways to go. Think about growth, obviously, but also think about focus and commitment. Think about the body language that you hear from Tracy and Doug, some of the leaders, but also what you're hearing in the body language from the workforce. And then think about it from a people and a culture perspective. So on the back end of the video, we'll have a little discussion, and I'll share sort of the outcomes that they have realized. So Ed, when you're teed up, we can go ahead and play the video.
As we redid our growth strategy, what we recognized is we'd lost some innovation, some engagement, some excitement in the business that we felt like we really needed to infuse back in there to be able to effectively execute our strategy. I think we'd also lost sight of our customer. So much of what we were doing is building this scalable infrastructure that made HMS more effective, more efficient. But we lost sight of the fact that that's only positive if it actually is adding value to our customers. When we decided that leveraging the work that John Kotter had done and the books that he had written was a good thing, we tried to do it ourselves. And we just failed miserably. It sounded so simple, but actually the execution of it, like many things, was much harder than we thought. There was no way we were going to do it ourselves. We really needed a partner in helping us.
I think working with Kotter and that team, they helped us kind of look at some of the areas that were really underperforming in the business, help us create a big opportunity statement, which really let us focus on the issue.
There were 4 of the Kotter principles: the head and the heart, the leadership and management, the want to versus have to, and the few versus many, that were principles that grounded all the work that they did and now are beginning to ground all of the things that we do within the organization.
I think one of the changes that helped that growth pick back up was us seeing a shared alignment across the teams about where we wanted to go, and really taking some leaps of faith there and not being afraid to fail.
The way that Kotter has really helped us change, they've created a whole structure around how to get involved in the business and be more part of the business, so everybody feels integrated, focused, compelled, and part of the answer. Kotter really cares about the companies they work for, and they take it personally if you're not succeeding. It's not another engagement, it's not just another opportunity. They feel as invested as you are in the outcome, and I think that means a lot and says a lot about their culture.
HMS people have been a huge component in this success. They're the ones that have really driven the results. And what we've been able to do working with Kotter is to help give them the opportunity, unleash all of those skills and talents and perspectives and ideas that they have, and give them an opportunity to really make those come to life at HMS.
It's easy for us to categorize and talk about how HMS and Kotter has changed HMS. The part though that I think doesn't always come out so easily is how it's helped all the different individuals within the company gain skills that they otherwise may not have been exposed to. This is a structure that can really help us achieve more and help you grow as a person.
Yes, to see the change and the difference, not just from the metrics that we look at every day, but the way that a team would rally around different initiatives. So it's not just an executive level experience or mandate. Folks in the trenches, folks in the middle can really experience the difference.
I think a lot of companies approach these types of things as employee engagement or a cultural change. And while certainly those are great byproducts of what we did, I think the key thing that makes it sustainable, exciting for the business, for our investors, for our board and all of that, is it truly did change the trajectory of our business results and really provided growth at a pace that at that time we couldn't have imagined.
Thanks, Ed. So if you can go to the next slide. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat. One of the things to think about and that we experience is growth happens on 3 different levels and then ultimately helps the organization. So if you think of it as an individual, a team, and a senior leadership level, growth and culture change have to happen at those 3 levels in order for the organization to transform. And in order to do that at a rapid pace, you can't just stop at the leadership level. And we found that you can't just do it at the grassroots level. When you're bringing, especially if you're bringing multiple highly complex, target company, acquiring company, and multiple SIs, everyone has to be on the same page and headed towards a North Star. And having a scientific approach, we found, sort of helps with that. The key takeaway here is, and the reason I really love this video is transforming and creating growth doesn't always have to happen from an organization that's not realizing growth currently. So HMS transformed from a position of strength. They already had great growth, but they said, we believe that there's some more growth out there that we need to tap into. And historically, they have always, and we see this across a number of clients, it's very interesting that there's an opposite correlation between workforce engagement and culture and business results. One has to be high and the other has to be low. And what we've been working with and we find fascinating that there is a better way to have a very sound culture, a very active and energized workforce, and also have those business results prevalent. So in HMS's case, this was exactly the fact. And their senior leadership team was rewarded, the organization was rewarded, and of course the shareholders just thought it was just amazing that these things were happening very quickly. To tie back to what Ed mentioned earlier around the final point around the what if, a lot of this work that HMS did was in the form of portfolios of very fast 90-day sprints to realize business results and cultural results for the organization. So think of those as the wins that Ed was talking about. If you remember that graphic, the wins was a circular loop because we want to capture and celebrate those wins. It's just like working out. If you go to the gym 3 days a week and you continue to do that, it becomes a habit. So that's the same way. Realizing those wins and celebrating them become a habit. The other thing that I will say here is along this journey that HMS, we looked at it as how can we build their capabilities. We originally started working with them very closely, building their capabilities, and then they got to be able to do this work 90%, actually about a little bit below 95% themselves. And then they would come for advisory stuff for some of the really squirrely stuff. This was, over a year journey to get them to that path, but they're on that self-sufficient path now where the organization's energized, they're continuing the momentum with the wins, they're driving growth, their stock prices continually go up. They recently had an acquisition, so everything is sort of humming along with them. I can't see the chat, so if there's things in the chat, Ed or Kenan, please stop me. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, Kenan, to you for the question.
Great. Can you open it all the way up, Ed? So next polling question, number 2, is what was the primary reason for HMS's growth in revenue and stock price? A newly released product captured a greater than expected market share. B, a significant improvement in employee engagement unlocked revenue potential. C, a reorganization drove organizational efficiencies and cut costs by 30%. D, new C-level leadership infused innovation into a go-to-market strategy.
And before you answer, all of these responses could be correct. They're all good ideas, but just specifically for HMS, what was that trigger that really drove the revenue potential that Rod talked about?
That's right. Yeah. There we go. Here's the results. Mostly B, a significant improvement in employee engagement.
That you guys were paying attention. I love it. That is exactly correct. And as Ed was alluding to, all of these can be right individually or combined. In the case of, I don't know if you caught the last comment that Tracy iterated. She said growth at a pace they couldn't imagine. So it's even better than unlocking revenue potential. It's, again, from a position of strength where, great companies are doing great things and they're trying to realize, net new value, net new growth, and being able to do something that's focused on, the head and the heart, leadership and management, engagement from a culture and workforce perspective can directly correspond to increasing growth. All right, fantastic. We all get an A on that one. Next slide. The key takeaways from this is, when you think about really transforming an organization or a target and an acquirer, you really want to look at it of how can the organizations come together. There's going to be some pros and cons, some positives and challenges on both sides, but what's the new way of working that's going to drive the culture that's ultimately desired for the organization? And do that along 2 dimensions, a dimension of being very fast or accelerated, and doing it that in a way that it's going to drive value quickly when it comes to changing the organization. And what I mean by that, one of the pieces of science says, try not to get everyone in the organization on board, because what happens is you'll be doing that forever and you'll never make progress. So how can you go where the energy is, get the folks that are truly transformational, and then create new ways of working and wins from that perspective? The example that I love to use and gosh, I'm dating myself on this, but if Apple comes out with a new iPhone, Rod's not going to be out there in the rain at 3 a.m. waiting in line, camping out to get that new iPhone. Not my son, my 20-year-old son may, but I'm not. I'm going to wait a year and see what bugs come out, the new version, the new phone comes out, and then I'll get it then. That's the way humans work. There's going to be some folks that are, innovative. I want the newest everything when it comes out. There's going to be some that early majority want to see some of the ups and downs of that phone. It's like, okay, now my risk profile says, okay, sign me up. That's the same thing with humans. That's the same things with organizations. So when you think about having a different mindset of what a win could be and how you can move fast in an organization, that's where we try to help organizations, again, across those three dimensions: individual, teams, and the senior leadership team. If you do all those things across those three dimensions, the organization will follow. Next slide. Let's keep a focus on yes.
Can you go back to that slide? I have a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Rod.
Thank you.
I'm curious, and Ed, please chime in here too. I'm curious in these, when you're targeting a company and then this acquiring company, if you have any statistics or just any insights on, number one, like general statistics on when the transformation and the mindset has been established in advance, and you have agreement versus not. That's question number one. Mm-hmm. And then question number two is, when, even with the mindset being established, or everyone in agreement, or the appearance of agreement, let's put that in quotation marks, of the acquisition, have you ever measured whether it really did get down to that management level of there was agreement, or there's people that are still with the organization, or whether there was turnover that are silent naysayers, for lack of a better term? You see where I'm going here?
Yeah, absolutely. Two fantastic questions. And in my 20-year career, I've done some M&A work at a previous firm. So I have a lens from both sides of the fence. And one side of the fence is, this type of work is usually not prioritized. So it's done, post day one, where things are coming together and it's an oh crap moment. And it's like, wow, okay, now let's go back and focus on the people and try to get the culture right. By that time, the complexity has quadrupled, and it's almost, you're swimming uphill. But if you think about the culture up front and bringing, of course, the alignment that Ed talked about earlier, but you're bringing the voice of the organization, both target and acquire, in to that conversation. And it's not a 100%, push down through the organization. It's meeting in the middle where they feel like they're involved. Number one, that does reduce turnover. Number two, it reduces the complexity of the overarching deal that's going on, and it helps you get to generating those wins faster. We found, and I found throughout my career, the longer you wait to have those conversations with, the masses, the workforce, and bringing the cultures together, that's going to lead people to get frustrated and leave. That's going to lead to increased complexity. That's going to lead to higher cost when you think about all the integrators that you have coming in for the systems and the technology integration. So everything sort of increases with that, which is why we when we talk to clients and we talk about some of the guiding principles, we say, let's get this done first, and it will save a ton of heartache and complexity down the road.
I'd like to add to that as well, Kenan. In addition to supporting our clients' merger and acquisitions and restructurings, personally, I've been part of 4 kind of M&A events where I was part of the company that was acquired. So there's absolutely a feeling here, if you will, of employees when they're with an organization, they're acquired. That's not what they signed up for. The new organization, and people are going to assume the worst in most cases. It's human behavior. If it's not addressed early on, people will assume the worst, and that water cooler talk will just continue to spiral downwards, if you will. A common attrition for organizations that really just do a mediocre job at an acquisition is about a third of the acquired company employees will leave in the 18-month or so time period post an acquisition. And if you think about from a business case perspective, if you're losing a third of the employees, the reason why you purchased that company to begin with, you've just lost a third of that workforce. In many cases, these are not the bottom level individuals. These are the top level. These are those key talent individuals who recognize, you know what, I've got the opportunity to use this as a means to go someplace else. And so that bleeding of talent can be exacerbated, and it really does impact the reasons why that company was acquired and the expectations of the results, the revenue, the additional market share, et cetera, that you were focused on achieving and planning on achieving. And so that goes out the window. By focusing on that at the beginning, by having culture a consideration, just like the financial evaluation is, just like the IT considerations and the onboarding considerations are, then you mitigate that and you really quickly start getting the organization, and Ken, to your other point about managers, driving down messages, but also raising up an upswell and enabling and empowering the employees to talk to where people ultimately may not agree because it wasn't something that they signed up for, but they understand the why. They can get behind the why. They can get energized about what this new merged company can do together. And as long as it's not a complete assimilation, hey, it's our way or the highway, but there's listening and there's involvement and there's a transformation where you're taking the best of both, then that's going to minimize your attrition. It's going to energize this acquired company, and it's going to give you results that even you maybe were not even anticipating that you could get from this acquisition itself.
I just want to make a point, and then there's a question in here from somebody. I don't know whether this was intentional, but if you look at the first 5 bullets on the left, on the top of your slide, it is my perception that organizations, when this happens, squash those first 5 together very quickly and get to, okay, how are we going to integrate this, right? And then move to the integration, right, plan, and how are they going to consolidate? And often, I think these first 5 are squashed together.
You know, Ken, that's a fantastic point. The number one mishap that we see is they think the culture change and, you know, the energizing the organization can be done by doing communications plans. And that is absolutely wrong. To be able to capture the synergies from both of the organizations that they sold to shareholders and all of their, you know, advisors, to be able to unleash the power of the organization, to be able to capture that faster than the business case is the value that can be driven out of thinking about it this way. And it's, you know, exponentially more than a standard communications plan.
There's a question in the chat. One of the most common challenges for companies is the generational differences in culture. How or do you accommodate for those differences, generational differences in culture?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to with my Apple example. There's the science tells us there's Rogers law of diffusion, and we utilize that curve when we help organizations think of a different mindset around their culture and their workforce. So we don't believe that that you have to wait to get 100% of the organization on board to make significant progress towards transforming your organization. So that means going where the energy is. Ed made a statement earlier that you may recall is everyone wants to be a part of the winner. That's sort of the genesis of this. If we can get if an organization is 1,000 people, as an example, if we can get it can be even the first 50 or the first 100 sort of signed up around this transformational change, this shift in mindsets that we're doing. And now going back to the graph that Ed talks about, again, this is the science, making sure that we are articulating and role modeling those new behaviors, generating and celebrating those wins, and continuing to do that. So now all of a sudden, once those wins come to the organization, you have the other 900, a subset of the other 900 wanting to get involved. And slowly you're getting half the organization. And the science has showed that if you have 50% plus one person urgent or active within the organization, you can say that you're urgent and the rest will come along. Now, there may not be, there's a small, I should have had the curve in here, but when you think about the curve on the very far, a sine curve, on the very far right are the laggards. You may never get those laggards to really buy into the transformation. And those are the ones that may stick around and just do their minimum job and not really be involved, or those are the ones that may exit the organization. But everyone else on the front of that sine curve are active in some way, shape, or form.
And I would add that the generational gap is absolutely, to Rod's point, it is prevalent. It has to be addressed. Being able to, we talk a lot about urgency teams, and having a representation across that is key. To Rod's point, there are some individuals that will just not come along for the ride. They will not get on the bus and select a seat. And that's okay. Transformation is transformation. It's in the workforce as well too. And it just makes it more challenging when you have to stakeholder and address the needs, but you have to factor that in. Look at it as an opportunity, because you're bringing in different perspectives, different ways of tackling problems. Certainly the millennial and Generation X have more of a desire to be involved, to innovate, to bring fresh ideas compared with, with my generation, if you will. But enabling and empowering people to add value where they are, and giving them the opportunity to kind of understand the vision and the strategy of where things are going, and understand how their specific role plays a key part in that, is something that will certainly go across all the generations, and will develop that level of engagement that we saw from HMS that drove those results. So I'll go to the next slide here, Rod.
Yeah, great. That was a great conversation, by the way. Loved it. Yes, so go build it. There we go. So this is sort of the approach at a very high level. When Tracy from HMS was saying that, we read the books and we tried to do it ourselves, you wouldn't believe how many times I'm talking with folks trying to educate them on Kotter, and they say, wow, we're big John fans. And, we love their approach, and we're trying to do something. So if you just think about this as the wrapper, the circles that you see are really the 8 steps, the famous 8 steps around cultural change or accelerating cultural change. The big opportunity is one of the first things that we work with organizations around. And when Ed was speaking earlier around getting the key stakeholders aligned around a North Star for the organization, whether it's a transformative initiative that they're going through, or whether it's a 24-month journey on a merger and acquisition. How do you get those key stakeholders aligned? And as Kenan mentioned a second ago, and I responded, is more times than not, they try to do that a year into it. And it's too late, because everyone's moving in every different directions, and there's micro misalignments around what's the purpose, how fast we should be moving, what we should be focusing on. But our science behind this says that there's a window of opportunity for all types of deals that you think about from a transformational aspect, if you will. And you want to capture that window of opportunity before it closes. And all opportunities close. It may be a 6-month opportunity, it may be a 12-month or 18 months, whatever it is, but there's some change, behavior, habits, execution that has to happen in that window of opportunity. And we help organizations think about that in a different way. If you look along to the left, you'll see urgency. And we've mentioned urgency a couple times throughout. That's a key part of what we think organizations should focus on. And urgency means being able to make the tough decisions around what's most important. And especially when you think about an acquisition, there's important things that are being done on both sides, and then there's some sort of list, hundreds of important things to do, and you can't do all 100 of those, successfully at the same time. So how do you get alignment around making decisions around what's most important? And I'll pause there because that's the crux of the big opportunity, is forcing those conversations to happen. And think about it, if you have a targeted company, acquiring company, you have system integrators that are in helping out, you have strategy consultants that are in helping out, so just think all that complexity has to be aligned. And we try to help organizations think about that from a building a case for change perspective. And when you think about a time for this, we help organizations think that there's a better way. Again, in the HMS video, Tracy talked about growth at a speed and a level that they haven't even thought about. So some of the mindset shifts that we help organizations think about is, well, if you want to save, $25 million in year one, we can help you do that, half of that in 90 days, and the second in a phase 2 in 90 days. And it's like, there's no way that can happen. But then once you get the cross-functional team together and begin to unleash their thinking from that they've had culturally in their respective organizations, now the impossible slowly becomes possible. And then they realize those different things. So we wanted to share what this looks like. And now there's a ton of stuff that happens underneath that we're not going to go into. But when we talked about there's a science to change, there truly is a science, and there's a lot that happens underneath. And if you can think back to what Doug and Tracy were saying in the video that we saw, and how I responded, they're doing 90 to 95% of this themselves now, after riding along with the train through their journey. That's a lot. And the point of that is, how can you bring in multiple organizations together? How can you build the capabilities so those organizations can be self-sufficient and sustainable over time? And that's the real beauty of having discussions like this and sharing models like this. So I'll pause there. I can't see if any questions are out there, Ed.
Well, I'd like to just pick up on that last point and definitely encourage any questions or comments that you have. If we're helping an organization, say, implement an ERP, and their expected timeline is 15 months, if we can help them accelerate that and to do it in 11 months, there's significant cost savings there. There's significant savings in just workforce, less change fatigue. You're capturing value because of the automation and some of the other benefits that you're getting from that. If we can help an organization just take whatever other integration that they're looking for, and from close day 0 to 3 months out, if we can help them accomplish what they were expecting would take 6 months or 9 months to do, significant value there. If we can look at a strategic priority that's going to save $20 million in cost efficiencies, maintenance cost, and increase that to 35, because we're using the power of the workforce from the bottoms up in addition to the top down to identify additional wins, additional savings and productivity, additional, hey, we don't even use this system anymore, why do we even maintain it? Those types of wins that kind of bubble together to create the overall value. That is hard value. And that, we saw from an HMS perspective, how the stock price went from $8 plus per share to over 40 in that few year period, which positioned them for the acquisition as well. So this culture change and the shift in how the workforce gets work done does create and accelerate these business results. And what you see here on this slide is, when there's a case for change, when there's an organization that top down and bottoms up is aligned to accelerate that change through a guiding coalition with this sense of urgency and activating the workforce, you get these results. At the end of the day, the true values coming from the workforce culture itself is now positioned to work differently. to accelerate results. And that's at the individual level. It's also at the organizational level. And those wins will continue to occur because that set of habits as to how work gets done has changed. It's transformed itself.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for that, Ed. Some of the things that we hear, Ed made me think of a couple things that we heard from clients is, it's almost instantly somehow that, when we're having these conversations, people's like, wow, I get it. This is my insurance policy. And not only you're my insurance policy, you're helping the growth engine. So think about it like that. That is, being able to focus on not only capturing the synergies that are being articulated, but how can you unleash the power of the organization to cap those synergies and do it faster while reducing your overall risk.
Hey, can you go back to that slide? I just have a quick question.
Yeah,
so
sure.
See where it says generate short-term wins, and then right afterwards you have a whole section about scorecarding and learning and adaptation. So 2 questions. The first one is, you create a vision of a short-term win. But here's a bad example. I'm going to reduce cycle time by X%. Let's say, that's just putting that. And you think you can generate a short-term win by that. I'm curious how many, when this is done in this fashion, that you find out that this is never going to happen, right? Or there's just no way. Do you drop and stop and assess trying to find a short-term win? Because that's really disempowering. I'm sure this often happens where you think you're going to get some kind of benefit or a short-term win, and how far should one stay in there to try to create that? And then the second question is the scorecarding. I'd just like to hear some scorecarding metrics that you think, I saw them trying to measure this, but it was the wrong measurement. This should have been what was scorecarded, right?
Yeah.
Like that.
You asked some fantastic questions. The first one around short-term wins is if you look over to the left around building the case for change, and an outcome of having that big opportunity statement is now we have a North Star. We've prioritized what we need to do to achieve whatever we have defined as success for that North Star. And one initiative that we want to really figure out is reducing cycle time. And because we got aligned, we think that's important, that made the list. Now, if you probably don't recall in the video, but what happens is when you're going through these 90-day cycles around generating these short-term wins, in week 4, we may say reducing cycle time is not going to get us the return on investment or the impact that is desired for the organization. Let's shut that down. And we document that as a win. And the reason we do that, we help them do that is that's a new way of working. Before, the culture may have been, we never kill projects because the project manager will get, a scarlet letter, and the owner from a leadership perspective will do the same. But now we're celebrating that because we didn't spend a year trying to figure out it wasn't going to provide the impact. We only spent 4 weeks. So now instead of losing $1 million, we only lost 50K of that time and effort around the 4 weeks. That's just an example, but that's how we generate wins. Wins aren't always the ones that are in American football, scoring a touchdown. They can be, we just, had a 3rd down and got 5 yards. So that's how we sort of look at it. And that becomes very valuable in the organization when you talk about shifting the culture and shifting the mindsets. The second piece of your question is, scorecard. And I'll give this as a form of an example. We were working with a global oil and gas company, and they had a bunch of initiatives. And one of the leaders was in this big opportunity session, said, we've been thinking about looking at our manufacturing plants and reducing costs. We think it's about $5 million. Let's prioritize that and see if we can get that $5 million cost saving as a win. So with a mindset of thinking about how we do things and how we can do them differently, there was, and again, whoever asked a question around, workforce, the new generation, the aging workforce, this is a fantastic example. once we got the folks that were closest to the work around these 90 days, we helped them identify $20 million in savings and no, $22 million in savings and close to 20 million year over year after that. And you know where that the prime focus of those ideas came from? Was from someone that had been there 30 years. No one had listened to him in the past. And he had a notebook. He had a notebook of things that he's been writing down for years. And now finally a team got together to focus on that. And that's how we generated that. So go back to what I said. They said, let's get $5 million out of this. They got 20 million, 22 million the first year and 19 to 20 million annualized. That's a huge win. And now folks are seeing that started with that gentleman that was in the manufacturing plant. Now, instead of being a laggard, they're energized because, wow, we see the organization is really starting to listen to us now. So now they're signing up to be part of these accelerators to help drive growth and be listened to within the organization. So when you think about a scorecard, that's where those things start popping off the screen around, the value being realized within the organization.
Other things that we've seen.
Hold on a second, Ed, real quick.
Yeah.
Holly, we have someone trying to ask a question too, and I want to be mindful of time and open this up. And you guys, I see the presentation. We're close to the end. So Holly, are you unmuted? Because I thought I did the magic to unmute you.
Sorry, I raised my hand in error.
All right, thanks, Holly. I just wanted to be respectful.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and so just one other point to mention here is the power of empowering the workforce and expecting innovation from the ground up will take the expected business case of $50 million in cost savings, or the 5 million that Rod said. And now you've got the individuals that said, wait a minute, we can eliminate 2 steps in whatever, our manufacturing process or our accounting process. And it's going to save us 2 hours a week per person. There's a team of 20 people. That's 40 hours a week that you've now saved over the course of the year. Take the average salary of someone, add the benefits load, call it 100K. That one win, that one process innovation by somebody that just said, wait a minute, in accounting, we don't have to do this. We don't need these 2 steps, just saved you $100,000. You take those, and in typical transformations, you'll have dozens, if not hundreds of these wins that then just adds to the overall value that's this mindset shift is providing for you.
Hey, just a quick question. This is so random, but and I'm sorry, I'm going to ask this real quick. Do you redo the director's MBO or bonus plan? Because I bet someone, if they're Jordan, is that like if you cut off projects early and said, you know what, they're not going to get that ROI, someone's bonus or someone's compensation is tied to that. Is this Rod approach says that you'll reassess bonuses in context of this when someone's MBO kind of gets taken out from under them because we all agreed this is not going to happen?
Well, it does, but it doesn't happen right away. Once they see the power that the mindsets and the new behaviors are generating, that quickly becomes part of the HR process. And how can they change their bonus and benefit structure? Because now they're doing things from an innovation standpoint that are best for the organization instead of best for them as an individual.
So let's let me add put that last question up. Let's get the last question in so these folks can get their CP. Yeah. Last question, everyone. Polling question 3 is RGP and Kotter's approach. Assess leaders to determine who will be retained in the transformed organization. B, serves to align every single employee before the work actually gets started. C, removes organizational and people risks while accelerating business results. D, none of the above.
And we don't mean this to be tricky, but we wrote the responses this way because we're talking about accelerating results and how do we accelerate through this approach. So kind of keep that in mind.
There we go. There's the results. Organizational people risk while accelerating business results. assessing.
Rod, do you want to talk to this real quick?
Yeah, so for what we've been talking about, the correct answer is C. And I see a number of folks put 1, assess leaders to determine who should be retained in the transformed organization. The purpose of the approach isn't to do that. And I'll just be fully transparent. We get asked a lot to help them think about that because we have a lot of contact with the leaders throughout the organization, but that is not the goal or the primary goal of this type of approach.
Yeah, really the goal is, how do we mitigate the risk that people will resist the transformation? How do we mitigate the risk that leaders, they just might align with the head nod, but they won't really align in terms of resourcing and commitments and budgets and approvals that they need to have? How do we mitigate the people risk that typically, this is what causes delays. This is what causes projects to go on forever or to not achieve their benefits, is because there isn't the alignment and there isn't the motivation of the workforce. How do we get people aligned? In other words, how do we mitigate that risk? Okay, well, we are almost out of time. We just have a couple of remaining slides. We thought you might be interested, what is a sample timeline to accelerate transformation and growth? And this is just a sample of what we've done for our clients. Consider a couple of moves. Move 1, we've talked a lot about alignment, and that's just absolutely key. The biggest challenge that we've seen is it's that leaders and organizations have too many priorities, and that there isn't a prioritization of the priorities, if you will, a criticalness of the priorities. And so helping to align, not just in head nodding, but in terms of resourcing and commitments and decisions that specific leaders and their organizations will make to the most critical priorities, and then to accelerate them, to agree to a set of goals and objectives that we will achieve in 90 days, and then to kind of use the model to track and celebrate and make corrections as necessary, but move towards achieving that set of results in that 90-day period, celebrating the wins. That's then what generates the next move and then the next move. So thought you might be interested in kind of a sample timeline around that. And then the final slide here is, when we send this out to you, you can click on this link. There's a external landing page that we have, which provides more information around client success stories, tools. There's various ebooks that you could download to kind of provide more details around the 8-step model that Rod had talked about, and other information that you might find valuable in terms of a transformation and the organizational and people impacts to that.
Yeah. Only thing I'll add to that, Ed, is we love talking about this stuff and getting fresh ideas and perspectives. So we'd love to hear from you.
Great.
Ken, anything else from your end?
That's it, everyone. Thank you for joining. First of all, Ed and Rod, thank you so much for this. I thought this was a great conversation, and thank you so much. And again, all the folks, we will be sending you a survey, as well as those of you getting CPE, be getting that information too. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording.